Hello, this is the Principles of Government, Section C, Ratification of the Constitution lecture. Our prioritized standards, Government Civics 7. Objectively, we're going to analyze the significance of the Federalist Papers and also the Bill of Rights in the struggle for the ratification of the Constitution. On September 17, 1787, the delegates of the convention approved the final version of the Constitution, yet for it to become the supreme law of the United States, it had to be ratified by at least 9 of the 13 states. In each of the 13 states, 2 groups emerged, the Federalist, and also, which were those that favored ratification, and also the Anti-Federalist, which, believe it or not, were those opposed to ratification. The Federalists were led by James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and also John Jay, and many others who attended the Philadelphia Convention. The Anti-Federalists were headed by Thomas Jefferson and well-known revolutionary figures like Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, John Hancock, Samuel Adams. The Federalists stressed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation and argued these problems could only be overcome through this new government, while Anti-Federalists criticized that the Constitution greatly increased the powers of the central government and also its lack of a Bill of Rights. While New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the Constitution, without the states of Virginia and New York ratifying it, the new government would not likely succeed. So you don't have all of them lined up. Well, the rest are going to come falling down. In Virginia, there was much debate between Federalist and Anti-Federalist, yet Thomas Jefferson finally came to support the document reluctantly, leading to its passage. And he only did that after he was urged to support it by George Washington and James Madison. The contest in New York gave rise to a remarkable campaign of documents known as the Federalist Papers. And the Federalist Papers are a collection of 85 essays supporting the Constitution written by Alexander Hamilton, which wrote most of them, James Madison, and also John Jay. Due in large part to the Federalist Papers, New York ratified the Constitution, ensuring its success. Now, there's another piece of that puzzle. Instrumental in the ratification of the Constitution was the Federalist promise to amend the Constitution to include a Bill of Rights, which, as you might know, are the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. Well, you might not know, there actually were 12 proposed amendments, but only 10 of them got passed, which is what we consider our Bill of Rights. You can look up on Google, see what those other 2 were. One of those is actually our 27th Amendment. And these Bill of Rights, which further guaranteed natural rights to citizens by limiting the powers of federal and state governments. So, First Amendment, this guarantees 5 basic civil liberties, including a freedom of religion, meaning you can practice any religion or not practice any religion. Hey, it's up to you. And also the government can impose a religion on you. We'll talk more in depth about that in the future. Also, you have a freedom of speech. Within reason, you can say pretty much anything you want without having to worry about the government retaliating. Also, we have a freedom of press, meaning the media can report on anything without having to worry about the government trying to stop them. You also have a freedom of assembly, meaning you can gather together without fear of the government not allowing you to do so. And you also have a freedom to petition, which means you can petition the government for redress of grievances, meaning, hey, ask the government to do something. If you feel like, hey, you should do something about this, you can actually ask the government to do something. Second Amendment, the right to keep and arm bears. No, not arm bears. Bear arms. Or did it mean keep bear arms? Okay, it's just guns. All right. Third Amendment. This basically says no quartering of troops in times of peace. So that hasn't really came into modern times, but originally it was kind of a big deal. The Fourth Amendment, this protects citizens against unreasonable search and seizures and also requires probable cause prior to the issuing of warrants. And the Fifth Amendment does several things. This guarantees citizens protection from things like being tried for a crime unless a grand jury is convened. And what a grand jury does is they take in evidence and they determine if you will be indicted or not indicted, meaning charged or not charged. Also, we have a protection against double jeopardy, which means being tried for the same crime twice. So once you've been tried for a crime, they can't try you again later. So even if you came out with a book saying, hey, if I did it, this is totally how I would have done it, doesn't matter. You can't have the government charge you again. Also, we have a protection against self-incrimination, meaning you can't be forced to testify against yourself, which many people commonly say they're going to plead the fifth. Also, we have a protection from having life, liberty, or property taken without due process of law, meaning the government can take your life, they can take your liberty, and they can also take your property, but they have to give you due process or go through the legal process before they can do so. Another thing they protect you from is having private property taken for public use without just compensation. So founding fathers actually determined, hey, what if people have something we want? Can we take it? They determined, yes, we can. But the Fifth Amendment actually said if they do use this right of eminent domain, which is what the actual right of the government to take your property is called, they have to pay you for it first. Sixth Amendment. This guarantees citizens several rights in court proceedings. For instance, you have a right to a speedy and public trial. Also, you have a right to a trial by an impartial jury, so that would not be an impartial jury for Mr. Vick. You also have a right to be informed of charges against you and confront those accusing you in court. You also have a right to obtain witnesses in your defense, and you also have the right to have the assistance of an attorney for your defense. Seventh Amendment. This actually guarantees the right to trial by jury in civil cases. Now, I should point out this only applies in federal courts, not in state courts. So you don't actually have a right to a jury in the state of Tennessee for a civil charge, which means a non-criminal one that will not put you in jail. Also, the Eighth Amendment. This protects against excessive bail, fines, and cruel and unusual punishments. And also the Ninth Amendment that states that you have rights not listed in the Constitution, meaning that just because a right wasn't in the Constitution doesn't mean that you don't have that right also. So they basically put this to make sure that states didn't try to say, well, it's not in the Constitution, so you don't actually have that right. And finally, the 10th Amendment, which reserves powers not delegated to the federal government in the Constitution for the states and the people. So if the government didn't call dibs in the Constitution, hey, states, people, you get the leftovers. All right, this concludes Principles of Government, Section C, Ratification of the Constitution lecture. Again, our prioritized standard was Government Civics Standard 7, and objectively now you can analyze the significance of the Federalist Papers and the Bill of Rights and the struggle for the ratification of the Constitution.